Welcome to Garden Fork Radio. This is the eclectic DIY podcast that I have. It's me and a bunch of my friends talking about cool stuff. You can also check out our YouTube channel. Just type in Garden Fork on YouTube. It'll show up here. And today I have my friend Will, who is from Minneapolis. Welcome, Will.
How you doing?
I have to apologize to Will and everyone. We recorded this show about a week ago, and something went wrong with my microphone, so it sounded like I was talking in a tin can.
And we talked about so many smart things. I mean, we solved the world's problems. I'm sad to hear that tape is gone.
Yeah. You know, it's funny how people call it tape still, and it's actually a digital recording, but they do that on NPR a lot.
Yeah, I can't help myself. I do it all the time.
That's okay. It's just you're dating yourself.
Yeah.
So yesterday morning, I'm in the basement. I exercise in the basement, and I hear this dripping sound, and I'm like, what is that? And I can't figure out where it is. So it's behind a wall. And we have it's a row house in Brooklyn, and it's a stone wall foundation that has been covered over with sheetrock. It's a finished basement. It's very nice. But I hear this dripping, and I can barely see through this little service hatch. I see some water. So I get up my drywall saw, and I cut a piece of drywall out, and there's this dripping at the bottom of the plumbing stack that feeds the whole building.
So is that the sewer side, or is that the water side, like the service side of water coming in, or is it the water going out?
It's the water going out. It's a 4-inch cast iron sewer main that goes up through the whole building. And it goes, and when it hits the basement, it makes a right angle and goes into the street sewer.
Gotcha.
So I couldn't figure out.
That's gonna be a project.
Oh, it's a pain. So I'm a little overwhelmed right now. I just went to the home improvement store and bought more than enough cast iron and PVC. And in New York now, you can use PVC drain pipe in smaller houses. Almost everything here is copper water lines and cast iron drain lines.
So you just didn't buy like a bunch of caulk like I would and just kind of caulk the seam and just keep caulking it till you can't see the pipe anymore and call it good. You actually are going to, You cut that out and replace it?
Yeah, I actually run across a lot of duct tape and electrical extension cords behind walls when I work on stuff.
We were working on a remodel, and we had that same thing where you'd be in the kitchen, and if you had an appliance running and you touched the sink at the same time, you'd get electrocuted. Come to find out that there was no neutral, or something was wrong with the neutral in the ground on the outlet right next to the sink. So not only was it not GFI, but it wasn't grounded in any way. So if you touch ground while you're using something, you get electrocuted, or like lean up against the counter the right way and get electrocuted. So we had to fix that.
Well, I'm glad you did that.
Well, I'm all about safety, so.
Safety second, yeah. So that's my project for tomorrow. I went and rented what's called a cast iron pipe cutter. It's a ratcheting pipe cutter, and it'll make a really cool video. Instead of having to use a sawzall with a diamond blade, you can use this cutter, and it snaps the pipe in place, so it's a real time saver. But the pipe, it's a 4-inch pipe. It's behind a wall, and it goes up through the floorboards, and then it's behind the kitchen cabinets. So I'm trying not to have to tear open the kitchen cabinets to get to this pipe.
Well, and you just finished you did the island and then the countertop and everything. That doesn't have anything to do with that island that you put in. It's on the other side then? Right.
It's behind that. But we made a nice video about the kitchen island if you all want to watch that. It's on the YouTube channel there.
Nice. Yeah. Last time we talked about renting equipment, and we're in the process of doing that remodel on our property that we have, and we're raising a beam, and we don't have the equipment to do this. Called the local rental place, and they didn't have anything. And then there's a guy that we knew in town. He's like, "Oh yeah, I talked to these rental guys at this town nearby." We talked to them. They had a mechanical lift device that we just rented. It was $55 for 4 hours, brought it to the house, and we were able to do this great project, got everything put together, and we didn't have to buy the equipment. There's so much to the idea of renting stuff these days, where you can go to a rental place and you can almost get anything: party supplies, tools, equipment, a concrete saw. We're going to rent a concrete saw this week and do a little cutting for an egress window in the basement. But it's amazing what you can rent these days without having to go out and buy a bunch of equipment, and it makes it so much easier to do projects and a lot cheaper because you don't have to invest in all the equipment that you're only going to use one time.
Yeah, and the cool thing here was I actually factor in the cost of the rental, because I went to the rental place and they're like, "Oh, you want it for 4 hours?" I'm like, "No, I want it for 2 days." And they're like, oh, and I'm like, look, I'm not going to sweat trying to get back $20. I'm not going to try and save $20 on a tool rental and then try and rush the job, because invariably I'm going to need to cut a pipe tomorrow afternoon. And if I used the cutter once and I returned it, I'd be screwing myself, because I'd have to get in the car, lose my parking spot, go to the home improvement store, get the tool again. So I factor in a 2 or 3 day rental.
Yeah, it's kind of the best way to go. And if you ask, you can actually negotiate usually a pretty good price on that. We're renting some scaffolding right now, and they said, oh, it's $100 for a week. I said, well, what if I wanted it for 6 weeks? And we talked about it, went back and forth and everything, and it ended up being $65 a week if I took all the period of time. So sometimes it helps to haggle a little bit with those guys, and they usually work out a pretty good deal.
Yeah, it never hurts to ask,
Exactly.
So Will and I today wanted to talk about owning a second home. We both have that, and you guys have seen those all in the videos. And I get this perception a lot from people that thinks because I have a second house, I must be super wealthy or something. And neither Will or I can attest, are not super wealthy at all. But we both had a creative way of finding a house, a second home. And we thought we'd kind of walk you through some of that today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I get that sometimes too, like, oh, we're going up to your cabin up north and everything. And I'm like, well, no, it's really just a house in the woods on some land. It's not as everybody thinks of a second home as you're going to the Hamptons for the weekend and you're going to spend it on the beach and do all that stuff. But in all reality, second homes can be all sorts of different things, and you can get a lot of benefits and use out of it just by being in another area. I mean, we live in the city full time, and on the weekends we spend our time up in, the north part of Wisconsin around the Hayward area. And yeah, there's expensive homes up there, but there's also very inexpensive homes if you know how to shop for them, and you get the benefit of being in the area without spending, $1 million on a second home. So
yeah, we're right next to a very fancy town, but we live in the blue collar town next door, and that's fine with me.
Yep. Same with us. Hayward's a town of 2,000 people, and it's kind of the place you go to get your coffee, and you take your expensive boat and all that kind of stuff. And just south of it, there's a little town called Stone Lake, which has 250 people in it, and nobody's ever heard of it. And we're just outside of that town. And for us to go enjoy all the benefits of Hayward or the lakes or anything like that, everything's a 10-minute drive away, but we don't have the expense of living in the super fancy town.
How we I'll walk through how we found our little house, and then I think yours is a little more creative. We basically looked around town, and we didn't find anything listed on a website or through a realtor. Realtors kept on showing us these very expensive homes, and we're like, we don't have the money for that, And we actually asked around town, and somebody said, oh, there's this empty house up the road, but no, you wouldn't want that, And we're like, oh, yes, we would want that, Because it's kind of funny, because everyone thinks you want to buy a house that's like, shiny and ready to move in. And we drove by this house, and it clearly was empty, and the yard was all grown in, and it needed a lot of work. But long story short, we went to the town hall to find out who owned it. And then we wrote those people a letter. We didn't just want to show up in their driveway,
Sure.
And about a week later, they called us. And that began this 9-month dance of being very careful, because they were a little leery of us. They didn't quite understand why these New Yorkers wanted this dilapidated house. But it ended up I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry. How long ago was this?
It was 12 years ago.
12 years ago. Okay.
But we ended up buying a house that was very, very affordable. It was less than $100,000. And then I've been working on it ever since. So,
you know what though? I mean, if you like to do projects and you like to do those things, buying a house that doesn't have good curb appeal or has a bunch of problems with it. I mean, overgrown lawn and overgrown landscaping is a lawnmower, a weed whacker, and a weekend worth of doing that kind of stuff, and you can bring it back to where it needs to be. If it has electricity, if it has plumbing, if it has some good bones to it, and it doesn't have serious structural problems, you can pretty much repair or fix anything, and anybody can do DIY projects. I mean, I am moderately handy. I'm nowhere near the level you are, Eric, but I mean, it's one of those scenarios where we did the same thing. We found a home. Well, actually, let me step back for a second. The reason why I asked you how long ago it was that you did this is you said you went down to the courthouse. Nowadays, in the way that we did it was we ended up finding some land that we bought, and we were going to build on this land, and we were super excited. We're like, we're going to build a cabin in the woods. It's going to be great. And then we started talking to the utility companies and to bring in electrical, to bring in septic, and to drill a well. Like, it floored us. It was actually more expensive to do those three things than it was to actually buy the land that we were on.
Yeah.
And it kind of deflated us a little bit in the sense of we thought, oh yeah, we're going to build this cabin and it's going to be great. And we have all this stuff and we have all this acreage and so on. And then to come to find out that the utilities basically crushed our entire budget. So we kind of sat on the sidelines for a couple of years, and there's a program out there you can go search for. It's called the GIS, which is basically a global information system for your county.
It's a very cool thing.
Yeah. Remember how you went to the courthouse? Well, I just went to the internet. So what I did was you can go in and you type in, like, we live in Sawyer County. So you just type in Sawyer County GIS and it'll come up, and there's a little interface that brings up a map, and everybody's property with all of their information is in there. Their address, their taxes, if the property is behind in any way, shape, or form on their tax payments, the size of the acreage, if there's structures on it, everything you'd ever know you can find because it's all public knowledge. And most of the government databases went from those old plat books that were in courthouses to digitizing everything.
Yep.
And then just keep it up in a big database. So when we decided we weren't going to build, we started looking at the land around us, and we owned a 40-acre piece, and we noticed that the property next to us was owned by a trust company. And I'm like, okay, let's find out a little bit more about this. So I did a little research, and I sent them a letter, just like you did, that said, hey, my name is so-and-so. We share a border to my west. If you're ever considering or interested in selling, let me know, and we'd work out a deal. And it took about 30 days or so. And then I got a random phone call from, Stacy from the trust company saying, yeah, we've been trying to figure out how we're going to sell this or whatever, how much do you want to give us for it? Because there's, a tax assessed value, but we didn't get an appraisal or anything like that. I threw them a number, and they came back and said, yep, let's do it. Went to the down to the title company, which you just walk in there, the two parties, and go, he owns this. I have cash. I'm going to give him the cash. He's going to give me the land. They fill out a little bit of paperwork. Takes about 2 weeks to process it, and you've purchased property.
Wow.
I mean, don't get me wrong, real estate agents play a really important part in finding homes for people who are trying to find out specifics about areas and finding a specific home or negotiating a deal if you don't know how to do it. But in all reality, people have been buying and selling land for, hundreds of years, and it really comes down to two people sitting in a room agreeing on a price and agreeing on kind of the basics of it. I'll give you this, you give me that. And it's like, okay. So I use the GIS, and anybody can do this. If you're looking and thinking about buying a second home or buying some property or whatever, you could easily look on there, and it'll tell you, one, the houses that are listed and the houses that are not listed. But then on top of that, it gives you the address of the owner. And if it's something where you think, hey, I'm interested in this home or I'm interested in this area or whatever, it doesn't hurt. You type up a letter and send it to them, be really nice in the letter, give some contact information. And then if they call you, try to work something out. So that's how we started acquiring land. And then when we found out that it was so expensive to bring in the electrical and the plumbing and the sewer, we had noticed that there was a property on our other border that had another 40 acres with this old 1960s style Rambler home in Wisconsin. It's basically a square box made out of cinder block with a stick frame house on top of it.
Yeah.
Really straightforward, really simple, but it had electric, it had well, it had septic. And so we sent them a letter and said, hey, what are you guys thinking? Would you ever consider moving? And they contacted us and said to us, we're thinking of retiring to Illinois, and we were going to go through this process. We had the house on the market for 2 years and really didn't have any bites. What are you thinking? And I threw them the number. And the nice thing is by us doing that deal, they're also not paying commissions and fees and transactions. So when I threw them a lower number, they were like, oh yeah, I'll take it, because they get all of that money versus if you buy a $100,000 house, let's say there might be $9,000 worth of fees and commissions and things like that go to third parties to manage this thing versus party to party, where if I gave them $92,000, they'd end up in the same place. So I'd get a better deal, they'd get a better deal, and so on. And that's what we did, and that's how we acquired our second property.
Yeah, it's just kind of sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like, I've just seen where we actually drove around this town a lot before we bought something, and I got to know. I was just curious about different buildings, and the one this house just happened to work out. But so if you have an area in mind, just go drive around and ask.
Sure.
My other point, we live in Northwest Connecticut, which is kind of a Tony area. The county and people, I tell people what county I live in. They're like, oh, that county, you know. But the northeast part of Connecticut is called the Forgotten Corner. And it's actually on the way to Boston from New York. But there's a ton of great little towns there, but for some reason it's not on the New Yorker weekender radar. So
Yep.
I have friends that are buying over there, and they're getting a much better deal on either a fixer-upper, or they're getting a nicer house for the same amount of money. So if everyone's going north, think about going east like Will did, you know?
Yeah. That's exactly what it was. Is everyone goes up to Brainerd or to, Leech Lake, or some of the big touristy areas in Minnesota, and for us to buy the same property that we bought where we did in Wisconsin, it would have been probably 3 times as much. And I think that's one of the reasons why people think that second homes and getting into, that vacation home lifestyle is challenging, because they look at the first place they go is, okay, let's go where all the vacation homes are. And they usually go to the most expensive place. And then they start looking, and then they get discouraged because they're like, oh, I can't afford this, or it's really expensive. And then it just takes a little bit of, like you said, instead of going north, go east, or pick a town that's 10 minutes away from where you want to be. And it's amazing what the price difference is between a house. A house in the Hayward area might be $300,000, and a house in the suburb, or I wouldn't say suburbs, but the smaller town area might be $80,000. Well, all of a sudden that makes the difference in a payment of $400 versus $2,000 for a house payment. And all of a sudden, once you get into the math of those types of things, people start looking at it and thinking, I could probably swing $500 or, something like that, which then all of a sudden brings it into the affordable range, and you get all the benefits of doing this stuff, because riding a boat in Hayward is the same regardless if you have a $300,000 house or a $100,000 house. Riding a four-wheeler, going to any of the events is all the same. It's just how much you paid for your property.
Totally. The other thing, I just blanked on what I was going to say. You talked about riding a four-wheel. I just got my neighbor just tuned up my quad, so that was really cool.
Yeah, we actually ended up breaking down this year, and we bought a side-by-side, one of those John Deere Gators, but It's not like the farm one, but it's the regular one. And it's kind of nice because we bring our son Cameron, who's smaller, and my wife, and drive around. And my wife, she's an outdoors person, but I don't know, like there's a point when you're in an ATV where it's kind of like you're really going for the outdoor stuff, versus driving a side-by-side. It's like driving a little mini car around. So, before she wouldn't do a lot of stuff out on the property, and now she's taking that thing everywhere. Hey, let's drive out here and let's get some of this, or hey, let's go look for that, or whatever. And she's in it driving around. So it was nice. Plus we can load the back of it with tools and equipment and stuff like that to move around. So it worked out really well for us. And again, that's another deal I found on Craigslist. So it's one of those things where, there's, if you know how to value shop for stuff, you can get some good stuff.
Oh, totally. Like I love Craigslist for that. And you can also email them. Like I wanted to buy a bike, and I emailed the guy and I said, I'm interested in your bike. I said, but I just think the price is a little high. I was nice about it. And he dropped the price like online before we even met. So I thought
it doesn't hurt to ask. As you always say, it doesn't hurt to ask.
I got my quad from my neighbor. It was an older quad, and he's my neighbor. He's a great friend, but he's a little older now. He doesn't move around as well. And he's like, I'm not using that thing. You give me this much and it's yours. I'm like, okay. And so now whenever it breaks, I tease him. I go, where's the extended warranty on this thing?
Nice. So one of the things we were going to talk about regarding second homes too was kind of how it works. Like, what is your lifestyle with your home? Like what do you do? Like, give you an example. We usually leave on a Friday, and we miss traffic coming out of the city, and we spend a couple days, and it's nice because our schedules work out that I can either take a Friday or a Monday off, and same with my wife, so we can get a little bit longer of a weekend. But do you guys buy your food in the city and then take it up north, or do you leave stuff up there, or how do you handle food and travel and driving and all that stuff? Because I know a lot of people always ask me that stuff. They're like, oh, well, do you have a whole house full of stuff up there? Do you have 2 of everything? How do you handle those types of things?
Well, we have a refrigerator up there, and we're there almost every weekend. So I keep stuff in the freezer. But I try and shop during the week because we're there for 36 hours. And once I get to the house, I don't want to go anywhere, you know?
A little bit of planning goes a long way when you
It
have
does, because in the city here, the grocery store is literally on my corner. So I can, as long as I'm shopping for here, I'm like, oh, I get this and this. And then I have a couple of those kind of tote bags that are insulated with the zipper on the top, you know?
Yep.
And I just throw one of those freezer blocks in there, those little blue blocks of freezer stuff, you know? And that works really well. But so when I have enough brains to plan, I do that. I also keep a ton of canned food up at the house. We love beans, like black beans, white beans, chickpeas, and then I keep canned corn. In the freezer, I keep a lot of frozen vegetables. You know, if the power goes out, okay, maybe we lost that. And then a lot of jarred foods like tuna or pesto sauce, tomato sauces, cans of tomatoes, boxes of pasta, because it's all just, I like comfort food anyway. And you get up there and you're fried and you just want to make something real quick and boom, or, you know, boxes of macaroni and cheese. It's real simple. I don't make kind of ooh la la food up there. So,
well, one thing we found too is that don't get me wrong, I want to support the local economy up there, but the grocery store is much more expensive. I mean, for us to buy groceries in town and then take them up with us, we find that it's a little less expensive. Like butcher shop, of course, I'll use the butcher shop up there because it's, you know, they have a nice one of those up there. But a can of beans is a can of beans, kind of where you get them from. So we buy that stuff in the city. I don't know if you do this trick or not, but we have a bin. We call it the blue bin, but it's a Rubbermaid tote. And it sits in our entryway. And if you think, oh, I got to take this up to the lake, you just set it in the bin every time you need to before you leave. And then if you buy something at the store, you put it in the bin or whatever, you leave, that goes in the car with you, it goes up north, you unpack it. Then you think to yourself, oh, I need to take something home. Well, that bin is sitting there. You just put the items in that bin. And then when you drive back home, you always have the stuff. So in the middle of the week, if you think on a Tuesday, oh, I should take this to the lake, instead of remembering to try to grab it on Friday, on Tuesday, you just, you know, throw it in the bin, and you know it's going to go with you either back home or up to, you know, your cabin or your second place.
Yeah, I'm always surprised how much junk we lug back and forth. But we have a canvas bag. It's like a big LL Bean canvas bag. It does the same
Sure.
thing. I call it the back and forth bag.
Yep, that's kind of ours is the back and forth bin. We have broken down and we have bought two of a couple things. Like I was constantly taking my drill set up there, and you know, like the battery powered circular saw and all of that. And we kind of broke down one Christmas and we bought a second set. So now I have a set up there and a set back here, because when you want to do a project or something breaks, if you don't have the tools there. So we bought a really rudimentary toolkit and drill set for up there to do, you know, small projects. And then if I need to do something big, I'll bring the really nice setup, you know, on a weekend or something.
You'd be surprised how many tools you can buy at garage sales too.
Yeah, definitely. Or even just, you know, sometimes we'll shop on Amazon, you know, during the holidays, and they have, you know, specials. That's where we ended up getting one of our drill sets from, is they had it at like 40% off the day after Thanksgiving. And we were just sitting on the couch, had some internet, and we were just surfing around on the iPad and just hit the button and it got delivered. So it was kind of nice.
Speaking of buying online and hitting the button, if you want to support Garden Fork Radio Guys, you can use our Amazon affiliate link. It basically tells Amazon that you came from Garden Fork, and we get a little finder's fee. So you can remember it really easily. It's just gardenfork.tv/Amazon, and that will actually it will redirect you to the Amazon site, but it tells them that you came from Garden Fork. It sends a little tag along in the URL string, to be real technical about it, that you came, and it really helps us if you shop on a regular basis there or shop once. Just instead of going to Amazon.com, you can start on our website. There are links on the site, or just type in gardenfork.tv/Amazon, because Will does that, right?
Yes, I do. Actually, the interesting one was we just took the URL that you had and we just saved it as a favorite. So then I don't have to remember typing it in. Every time I hit it, I know that it's going to a good cause. So, you know, my wife, we were talking off the air about how much spouses shop on Amazon and stuff. And, you know, it's one of those things where if it can help the show and help everything else, it doesn't cost me anything extra. All I had to do was, you know, save it as a favorite on my browser, and I don't even think about it anymore, to be quite honest with you. So
I do have one thought, the one that I blanked on before, but I have two friends here in the city who rent their apartments, and because of the real estate market here, there's no realistic way of them owning a home in New York City. So they are buying houses in the country, and that's their first home.
Yep. Actually, that's what some of our friends do is they have, if you remember having a conversation, we talked a little bit about, I think this was off the air before we started talking today, but I was talking about like our house up north has very basic landscaping because the last thing I want to do is go up there and weed and try to maintain a perfect lawn. And in town, we have a nicer landscaping. So you kind of, when you have a second place, you make that choice of one of them has to be really nice and one of them has to be kind of basic because you don't want to have to constantly do maintenance when you're trying to spend your time relaxing because you could just stay at home and, do maintenance on your house.
Yeah.
But the other item is that some of our friends in town, the big trendy thing right now is having like a condo or being part of an association in town where they do the lawn and the maintenance and the everything to the outside of the house. And then they have a regular house out in the country or outside the city and things like that. And that's where they go on the weekends for their second place. And that way they don't have to maintain two lawns because last thing you want to do is have to drive up north and mow the lawn and then do all the maintenance there and then turn around and drive back and do the maintenance. And you're just constantly doing that back and forth. So they're taking one of them out of the equation by either renting or having a condo that takes care of all that stuff for you.
Yeah, I have a neighbor kid that mows my lawn, and once he'll grow out of it, and I'll hire another neighbor kid. But it's so worth it, just because you get up there and you don't have to mow the lawn. He does use the Troy-built mower, of course.
Nice. I will have to say that is one important thing too that I guess we had failed to talk about is to get to know your neighbors up north. Because I have a neighbor, Bruce, who lives down the way, a retired gentleman. He's lives just down the road. And when I say just down the road, it's about a quarter mile because it's that much space between us. But, I got to know him. I went over to his house. I brought him, some food and some beverages, and we kind of had a cookout, and our families got to know each other. And he said, hey, well, since I know you're only here on the weekends, I'll drive past your place and make sure that, there's no funny business or, things like that. And to get to know your neighbors, like if he needed help, I helped him with some projects where he had to get some stuff out of his attic and he couldn't really do that. So I went up and got all the stuff down for him. But then in exchange, he's been really nice and called me and said, hey, there's something in your driveway, or hey, I went past the house and a limb fell down, and so on. And it's kind of nice to know your neighbors that way. And, having a teenage kid to mow your lawn would be great too.
Yeah, we have the same kind of arrangement with our neighbors, and they're, most people want to be helpful. There's one neighbor who I see once a year, and he just keeps to himself, and that's just the way he is. But, most of them are quite gregarious. So
yes.
It doesn't hurt to hang out at the hardware store either, Yeah,
actually, that is a good place to meet people. So I did want to ask you something. You recently had a video about a rocket stove. Where did you come up with this? I mean, I've seen rocket stoves and stuff like that, but like I've never seen it in a 5-gallon bucket and, built that way. I've seen it always, somebody make something really elaborate and everything like that. And this was super simple. And we were actually thinking about doing it with a project with the kids this weekend to just, do something fun while we're up north. How did you even find this?
I found it. My West Coast doppelganger, Eric of Root Simple, did it. It's one of the most popular posts on their site, and I found it on Pinterest of all places. But a rocket stove is also sometimes called a jet stove. But the idea of it is you're taking a fire and putting it in a fairly confined space you're trying to induce a very fast draft, basically. And the rocket stove idea he had a metal bucket that he put a piece of 3-inch pipe in that enters from the side and goes up to the top. And I think he poured cement into it. And that's like a long-term solution. And my idea was to try and come up with something that you could do with your kids to get them, I think it's okay to play with fire as long as it's safe.
Sure.
And I came upon the idea of sand because I'm like, this is a thing it'll work, but it's not going to work for years on end. And it just got people thinking. So I did not invent it. But I came up with the idea of the sand.
Does it heat up really fast, or is it like when we cook outside, you got to build a campfire, then you got to get the coal bed, and you got to get it all layered out, and then you get the grate on there, and get the Dutch oven going, and all that kind of stuff. Is this thing fast or?
Yeah, it's like 10 minutes. You can put when your neighbors are throwing out their stove, grab one of the cooking grates off it because it fits right on top of the bucket, so you can put a pot on there or something. But the biggest thing is you have to keep feeding it fuel, and it's fairly small fuel. You know, it's sticks and stuff, but that gives your kids something to do, you know?
Sure. Yeah, Cameron loves to go out in the woods, and that's kind of one of the reasons why we got a place in the second place out in the woods is, the kids can sit at home and watch TV and do all those types of things and play on the iPad and the iPhone and all that. But to get up north, when we go up north, it's always projects. Like, think of like being a Boy Scout and all the little projects you used to do for that, or any of those types of things where we'd go out and we'd build a fort or how to build a campfire or those kind of things. And I see some of the projects that you do, and we actually do them up north because it's kind of a fun thing to do, and the kids look forward to doing it, and then they don't mind the drive and they get really excited about it and that kind of stuff, which is great.
Yeah, I think it makes driving easier because they know they're going to do some cool stuff. But the one caveat with the rocket stove is I used galvanized pipe, which is zinc coated, and depending on who you ask, that can either be not a big deal or a bigger deal. But when zinc burns, it gives off a gas that you don't want to breathe. So I would suggest when you first fire the thing up to let it burn for a while to burn off the zinc, and then go ahead and use it. Or you can use what's called black pipe, which is same kind of chimney stove pipe, but it isn't galvanized coated. So it depends on what you read on the internet as to how bad galvanized pipe is to expose to heat or not. So, and I'm not the expert. So it's always with Eric is use at your own risk. But I think for a backyard thing that just kind of show people what a rocket stove can do, and then get their brain working, because rocket stoves are used in what's called a rocket mass heater, and they're used to heat homes all over the place.
So I can build a 5-gallon heater for my house, is what you're saying?
Well, on a bigger scale, they use a 55-gallon drum actually, and then the 55-gallon drum has rocks in it with the vent tubing, and then the tubing exhausts into a concrete stone slab that radiates heat out and heats the house.
Interesting. I'll have to look into that. I think we'll probably go with a forced air furnace, but this would be a good second option, I guess.
Yeah, there are tons of videos about it. A lot of homesteading people are into that kind of thing, and good for them. Ooh,
cool.
Dead air.
I thought you were going to say something. One thing I was going to say is one last thing on the second home is you end up having a lot of time in the car. And I do have to compliment you on posting the older Garden Fork radios. I don't know if people know this or not, but on the Garden Fork website, you can download the original, like the first episodes or, way back in the day when this all started. So I'd been downloading them and putting them on my phone and listening to them in the car because, when you have time back and forth, I'm driving probably 2 or 3 times a week now up there because of all the projects and people I have to meet and just trying to maintain schedule. So I have a lot of behind the wheel time, and I've been listening to some of the old shows, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff you guys talk about, and the show itself has come a long way.
Wow, thanks. Yeah, I'll have to check on our server that we use what's called Libsyn, LIBSYN.com for the radio show server. And there might be a place where there's on one page is all 300 and something episodes. So, and nice. Actually one of the original hosts, Mike, I want to get him back on. And then Rick, Radio Rick will be back on soon as well, who is just kind of an amazing font of information. It's just, He's always busier than you and I combined,
Sure. Well, to throw a teaser out there for listeners, if you listen back to the old episodes, you can find out what state doesn't like Eric very much. And then what was the other one that I heard the other day? There's something regarding like food trucks and pork sandwiches and this tour that you guys did of a restaurant while you guys were on the road. Just little interesting things. Oh, and Eric likes a certain type of music when he vacuums. I think that was like in episode number 10, and that was pretty interesting. So
yeah, I might delete that one because that was a little bit behind the curtain,
I would have never thought, really. I mean, it's and then you mixed it in there, and I was like, "What is this?" And I'm listening to, but everybody has their thing, and I'll be honest, I listen to kind of the same music when I'm working on a project. You kind of just get into the groove and you go.
Yeah, I just need music that it just is almost like on just a loop, because it just
Perfect.
lets me focus. Like I can't listen to pop music and work. I just need something. So a lot of times now I'll play the ambient channel on Pandora or something like that, because I just need sound.
Yep.
So
Definitely.
wow. Well, that was great. We just yacked for a while there. I hope people are at their destination by now. And they're going to go buy stuff on Amazon with the gardenfork.tv/Amazon link.
Well, with the holiday season coming up, it's a great time. Just save it in your favorites, and you don't have to think about it anymore. And you're always helping the show.
Oh, we're going to have our cookbooks I like episode coming out soon because I always have a fall gift guide. So
Perfect.
if you guys have some ideas for cookbooks that I should talk about, it's radio@gardenfork.tv. That's radio@gardenfork.tv. So Will, where can people find you?
I run a YouTube channel called The Weekend Homestead, where we do all sorts of different projects, DIY stuff, garden fork type stuff, outdoor camping. We're on Instagram, and then I actually spent a lot of time in the Garden Fork Facebook group. So you'll find me there. People ask questions on stuff, or I'll get flagged on something and then write up a post on whatever it was. I think we did one on like solar panels the other day, and
Flagged in a good way.
yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
Every once in a while there's some nefarious person that gets onto it's a private group, but somehow they get in, and then they start posting bad things.
Yes, definitely. I've seen a couple of those come across. So
If you ever run across those, you can hit the little down arrow and it says report this post, and then it'll send me an email. So there
Perfect.
you go. All right, thanks everyone, and we will catch you again next week. Sorry about the technical details last week, and then I'll try and find this one page that lists all the Garden Fork episodes for everyone. So make it a great day. We'll see you later.